Welcome to Only Trying to Help, the podcast where we try to help you be helpful to other people. My name is Kate Watson, and we're going to focus today on helping in the context of romantic relationships. And I brought on a really great guest for that today. You know her well if you've been listening to our show for some time. Melanie is here with us. She is a licensed therapist who I know does work with a lot of couples. And so I thought Melanie would have a lot to share with us today about the kinds of patterns and dynamics that start to emerge when people in a romantic relationship start trying to help each other through things. It doesn't always go as smoothly as we might think that it will. Melanie, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm loving your artwork in the background. Are these kid
Thank
paintings?
you.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. She's like, can you put it up? Can you put it up? And I'm like, sure, I can put your artwork up.
Fantastic. Well, I did already set the stage here. We're here to talk a little bit about the patterns or the tendencies that start to emerge when people who are linked romantically start thinking, oh, I'm going to help my partner through this thing. And I'm going to guess that this comes up a lot in your work with couples. I know you've been working with more couples lately than you had been before. I started to think through some common scenarios that I imagine you run into. Maybe I can run them by you and you can say yes or no if that seems to be a pretty common scenario in your work with couples. How does that sound?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Well, I was thinking one common scenario has got to be where in the relationship, one person emerges as like the problem person and the other person is always trying to help the problem person. And I mean, my goodness, I feel like I know couples like this where there's just like a designated person who has a quote unquote issues. And then there's a designated person who's supposed to be helping with those issues. What do you see when you work with couples? Is that something that comes up?
Absolutely. Sometimes it's not as pronounced as that, but a lot of times I will find, and other times it's like very obvious. I have one couple actually in mind who they come in and it is like a barrage of, if she just did this differently, and if she did this, and I told her about this, and I've asked her to do this, and I've said to them, like, well, relationships are a two-way street, and both people have to make changes usually for the relationship to improve, and it's been a challenge because convinced that if she just changed this, then everything would be fine.
Yeah, and then the focus of the conversation consistently becomes, we are all here because of you.
Yes.
We collectively are in this moment because of one person. And the thing is, that'll play out even outside of the therapy session. I mean, I imagine what probably is happening in their everyday lives is that whenever something goes wrong, it is assumed that the problem person is at fault because the other person is not the problem person.
Correct.
Yeah. And I mean, that could just lead to some really dangerous assumptions and patterns when like the person who's not the quote unquote, designated problem person might be getting away with some poor behavior that needs to be addressed, but it never gets addressed because, well, I'm not the one with problems. That's the person with problems.
Yeah, and also it's almost like, what is the function of trying to fix and change all of these things about their partner? It almost kind of teeters on the line of controlling, because there's a lot of things that get presented in this person's argument that are pretty much just personality traits and are kind of central to who this person is. So it kind of begs the question, well, if you don't like all of these things about this person, then why are you with this person? So we have to also think about the origin of like, where is the intention coming from in terms of why this person is trying to help or fix so much.
Yeah, like, what are we doing here? Like, where is this going? I think you raise a really good point. And not to totally pick on the person who's trying to help or fix, I with a little bit of compassion for them, I can say I've been in relationships where the person I'm seeing grew up in a way where they felt like they were always in trouble. And they were always like the kid getting in trouble at school or getting yelled at home. And so like before I ever met this person, they had this identity carved out as, I guess I'm the problem everywhere I go. And then in a relationship with me, that started to play out. And I was like, but I don't think I created that. I don't think I assigned them the label, you're a problem person. I think the world has.
Yeah.
And now like it's occurring here where every little issue that comes up is assumed to be, must be their fault.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really important point, because that is why therapy is so important sometimes, because you have the opportunity to uncover all of those things that you just mentioned, because a lot of times how people were raised or things that happened in childhood regarding caretakers or parents or even just prior relationships can really shape the dynamic between two people. So either someone's desire to fix and change all of the time, or someone how they see themselves, if they see themselves as the problem or the person that needs to be fixed. The origin story of where those identities developed can be a really helpful piece in terms of that dynamic between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you and I, of course, would wish for anyone listening, like for whom this is resonating, that they would maybe consider therapy, but knowing that not everybody will, and maybe it's not always what the moment calls for. I think some of that searching for what's the origin story is potentially something couples can do together without therapy. I think going to therapy helps a lot. It helps to get some guidance around that, but potentially two people who are really invested and really want to dig deeply could say, I've noticed that I always make this assumption. I wonder what the origin is of that. I wonder where that comes from. And, for folks who are thinking maybe therapy is not for me, there probably are still some ways that you could explore that.
Absolutely. I mean, even an open conversation just about, I've noticed that you tend to do this when I have an issue or if I raise a problem, or being open about, hey, if I come to you with an issue, what I'm actually needing from you is this, and not, maybe advice or you trying to fix it, right? So being able to communicate what one's expectations are or what one's needs are is a great way to really figure out how to get on the same page with your partner.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, can I switch gears and throw a different scenario at you?
Yeah.
I've noticed in some relationships, one partner starts to feel like the parent, where, yeah, you sort of smiled there. I paused to watch you kind of go like, I see this a lot where one person, and look, I'm going to say in my life, it seems to be a lot of the women in my life say I feel like the parent, but that's not always the case, and some relationships don't have any women. But in my social circle, it seems to be a lot of the women who I talk to who say, like, when did I become my partner's mother? And I think that role shift or role development may happen over time. It doesn't happen overnight. But when one partner starts to feel like they're parenting the other partner, I'm just going to say it, that could really tank a person's sex life pretty fast, because like, who wants to have sex with their partner when your relationship is very parent-child like? Yeah. And so it's something that I see emerging as a pattern. What do you see?
It is definitely a pattern, and I hate to say it, but I agree that a lot of times, at least in heterosexual couples, a lot of times it is the woman who is feeling like she is parenting her partner, who is her husband, And I think it becomes really problematic, more so than just the idea of, destroying their intimacy and their sex life. But I think the resentment that gets built over time through this dynamic creates a whole host of issues, right? So the resentment is this: I am already doing so much, and now I feel like I have to do more. Maybe they already have children, so now this feels like an additional child to the family. Also, many married couples do not look at parenting as a solo operation. So if they feel like they are now parenting their partner, they are feeling very alone in these tasks and responsibilities. So the resentment that grows and the feeling of, I do not get my needs met, I do not ever get to take a break, can have devastating effects on a couple's relationship.
Yeah, you've made me think about this in a different way. That not only does one person end up parenting the other, but they're a single parent.
Yes.
So they are single parenting their partner.
Yes.
Because it's not like they're bringing somebody else in to say, I got to parent my spouse now. Can you help me? Mm-hmm. So they're not just parenting, but they're single parenting. Like it's just like kicking someone while they're down. You also mentioned resentment. I actually had that listed as a whole separate item, but you gave me the nice bridge to it. On my list of patterns and scenarios that I imagine emerge, I thought, well, I'll bet one of them is when somebody is giving and giving and giving and helping so much, and they end up resentful of the other person, when it may not even be that the other person was asking for all of that. They weren't looking for all that help, but person A is giving and giving and giving and wondering, how come I'm giving so much? Not realizing that sometimes person A sort of stepped up for that or volunteered for that, and person B is like, you could stop.
That is also a really important piece, because sometimes I help couples to acknowledge their own role in the dynamics that have been created. So like you said, if person A continually gives and gives and gives and is now upset at the level of giving, sometimes I slow them down to explore what is happening for that person that they feel the need to give so much, even if their partner's not asking for it, right? So because now they've created a scenario where they're upset at their partner for doing something that they have essentially created. So that's a really important piece of this, is sometimes we have to look at our own behavior and how we show up and how that affects the dynamic that is not working between partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a tough pill for people to swallow, because again, I'm thinking,
very upset with me.
Hey, it's a tough job you've got, my friend. It's a tough job. All my years doing therapy, I never once worked with a couple ever. So my hat off to you. But I keep saying, like, I'm imagining, I'm guessing. So I'm looking for you to tell me if I'm on the right track. But I'm imagining if you're that person who gives and gives and gives, you're person A who's giving so much. You've painted this image of yourself of, I'm so helpful. Oh, I give. Like, I'm a giver. That's who I am. And you look in the mirror and you see yourself as such a good person. Then to be told, or have it at least suggested, that like your misery is your own, my friend. It's a really tough pill to swallow, because they might feel like, why are you coming at me? I'm such a giving, good person. The message I would say to a lot of people is, it is your job to only give up until the point at which you realize, if I give any more, I will be resentful. And you need to know that line. No one will know it for you.
Yep. That line is boundaries, right? So boundaries are such a huge and important piece in our relationship dynamic because like you're saying, if we don't know what our own boundaries are, then we will give and give and give and start getting upset that we have given too much, right? And a lot of times I clarify boundaries for my clients because people think that boundaries are, I will tell somebody else where my line is. And that's not a boundary. That is a request, right? So a boundary is something in which it only requires you, the person setting the boundary, to change, right? It requires nothing of the other person. So when someone thinks about how much that they're giving and they say, well, the next time my partner doesn't acknowledge that I've given all these things, right, I'm gonna whatever. Well, a boundary would be if they don't acknowledge or they don't respond the way that I've wanted to, I am going to pull back, right? It doesn't require them to uphold the boundary. It doesn't require them to do anything else. It just says, if this happens again, this is how I will change. This is how I will be different. And that is how you allow and the space for resentment not to grow and bitterness and all those other things that come.
Without naming names, I'm going to say I know a person who will offer to babysit someone's children and then get really mad when that person says, yes, I want to take you up on that.
Yikes.
And then I get the phone call of, I offered to babysit. Can you believe it? She said yes. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're offering.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know what to tell you. You are breaking your own boundaries. You are sending an invitation for someone to trample all over them, and you're inviting it. Yeah, these are not my favorite phone calls. Melanie, what have I missed? Because I have one other thing on the list, but it's I want to save it and let you go first because it's really different and it's probably not even in the realm of helping, so to speak. So I'll hold on to that. Is there anything that you think I've missed that comes up a lot in your work that you want to share with us?
It kind of touches on things that we've already talked about, but the dynamic of trying to help in terms of the help coming as an action or a something to do, I think comes up a lot. And again, I apologize to the men, but a lot of times this comes up in heterosexual dynamic where the wife will come to her husband with a problem or needing to vent, and her husband will immediately say, okay, I know exactly what we can do. Okay, I know exactly what you do. This is how you change. This is how you do it. This is how we fix it. And the wife is left being like, I don't really feel heard. I don't really feel seen. I don't feel like my feelings were acknowledged at all. And I don't even know if I agree with that plan of action because I haven't even processed my feelings about it. So what happens is we jump straight to trying to fix the problem without actually acknowledging, well, what's going on? How is the person feeling about this? What else is going on? And also a lot of times the wife feels like, well, does my husband not think that I could figure this out on my own? Does he not trust that I know myself or I know how to handle this? I didn't ask him to help me. I just wanted him to listen. That comes up a lot.
Yeah. I smiled when you said very often one person starts to feel like, well, did you think I was stupid and I couldn't have come to that on my own? That just resonated with me. And this is not necessarily in my romantic relationship, but just in relationships in general. When someone gives me advice, sometimes I want to be like, yeah, obviously, obviously that's a good idea.
I considered that. I actually thought of that myself. Huh.
Yeah. And even if I couldn't have thought of it myself, like, my goodness, I could have Googled that or something. Like, that's not why I came to a human. I didn't come to you to take up your time, your precious time, so that you could tell me something that I already know or could have Googled. So like, yeah, like, don't insult my intelligence. I know what I need to do, but like, be there with me. Just sit in it with me. Yeah. I'm sure that's a really common one that you see.
Yes.
All right. How about this weird one that I have, since we're running low on time here? I put something on the list and then I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't think that's about helping at all. Like, this whole show is supposed to be about the times we're trying to help somebody and it might go wrong and we mean well, but it goes off track. The dynamic that I put on my list was, I think couples do this thing where, like, person A has their own insecurity about something, and there's a problem with person B, but person A thinks, well, if I don't mention their problem, maybe they won't mention mine. Like, I'm not going to say anything about his anger problem, because if I do, he's going to mention my drinking problem. So if I look the other way, maybe he'll look the other way. And I do think this is really common. I have seen this a lot. And it was on my list, and I thought, does that belong on the list? Is that maybe the opposite of helping? It's more like, I'm not going to help you with that because I don't want to raise any red flags about what I'm doing over here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I probably would put that into the category of avoidance, which I think is a coping mechanism that a lot of couples employ. And I think it serves a similar purpose, though, right? So the idea of when someone is trying to help, right, we're trying to do something good, right, get rid of bad feelings or fix a problem. We're trying to help, right? And I think what you're talking about, this avoidance of, if I don't say anything about their thing, then they might not say anything about my thing, is also trying to keep the peace, keep things moving, keep, everyone on the same page and everybody happy. It's in a different way, but I think the intention is very similar, that, I just want things to be good, and I just, I have some things I need to work on, and if neither of us talk about it, then we can just pretend like it's not there and we can keep going, which obviously we know doesn't work very well usually.
Yeah. Well, you make a good point. There could be this spirit of, I really am only trying to help. I'm trying to keep the peace here. I hadn't thought of it that way. I was maybe thinking of it as a more cynical thing. Like, I just don't want anyone looking at me, so I'm just going to not talk about any of this stuff. But to your point, sometimes it might be about keeping the peace for the kids or appearances for the family at large or whatever the case may be. I do think there are other scenarios, maybe the more cynical ones that I'm talking about, where it could even be disguised as I'm trying to help somebody, but you're really not. Like, here's an example. I was listening to another podcast a couple weeks ago, and the woman was talking about how she got sober, and she casually mentioned how chaos ensued in her family at that time. And the interviewer was like, wait, I'm not going to let you just casually mention that. Like, wait, stop. What do you mean you got sober and your family had a meltdown? And she said, oh, well, that's a really common thing in families where everybody's drinking to unhealthy levels. If one person changes, everyone else kind of freaks out because it's like they've left the family norm, or they're not acting like the rest of us. And so it got me thinking about the times where we might say to people things like, oh no, like, your drinking's not that bad, you're fine. And we make it sound like we're just being caring and considerate, but really we just don't want to change ourselves. And if you change, I might have to change. So I'm actually lying when I say your drinking's fine. It's because I don't want us to both have to make some changes.
That's a really good point, and cynical for sure. And it makes me sad, but it's a really
what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's a really important piece of, when we avoid things in ourselves or try to diminish things in ourselves, we seem to have the capacity to do that in others. So if I say, I want to keep things the status quo, the way things are, I have to help encourage maybe someone else to maintain bad behavior because I myself want to maintain the same. And that is a very, very, very common dynamic for a lot of people.
Okay. So I'm not off track. It is common. You see it. I see it. I started to wonder if it was just my friends, because I'm like, oof, I see this. I see this a lot. Like, you're not saying a word about his issues because you don't want him to say a word about yours. And so I wanted it on the list. And then I was like, it's actually not helping. It's sometimes intentionally not helping your loved one because yikes, that might mean something for me. That's dark, but
we took a turn to a really dark place, but that's okay.
Yeah. We can get back on track. How about let's, and this I have no list for, but this is like, before we wrap up, maybe we should end on like, what are some things to do so that you can start to be aware of the patterns? Like, do you have any thoughts about how people can just become more aware or reveal like, wow, we do kind of have a pattern we fall into? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's about just open communication. I mean, if you can actually talk to your partner about, hey, when we do this, or like, what do you notice when we get into fights or the way that we fight? Like, do you think that it actually helps us? I mean, you would think that's such a simple and obvious thing to do, and yet I spend a lot of time and energy teaching couples how to do that exact thing. Like, what did you actually hear your partner say? Nope, that wasn't it. Let's try that again. Like, what did you actually hear your partner say? And being able to do that back and forth. So the level of communication that a couple has a lot of times will make or break them. So if you can actually just sit and talk, and maybe you have to say, listen, I'm going to say some things that might be hard to hear. And you might say things that maybe are hard to hear for me, but let's just agree that we're going to get it out there, we're going to put it out there, and we're going to try to talk our way through it. Maybe we don't say it the best way, maybe it hurts someone else's feelings, but we're just going to do it and agree that we are going to be in this together. Even something like that can hold a lot of
I mean, I love the idea of like normalizing making mistakes. Like, this isn't going to be perfect. I'll put my foot in my mouth sometimes. I might say something and be like, whoa, let me try that again. That's not how I wanted to say that. But the more that we can practice communicating and observing, what do we do when we fight? What's the thing that sets it off? Who goes next? What's the next thing that happens after that? How does it ultimately get resolved, or does it? What's the aftermath like? What's the day after like, or the week after like? But if you can begin to kind of map out those patterns, you might find that they're repeating. I heard somebody say once, couples pretty much have the same 3 fights over and over and over again. It's basically 3 things. And you should just sit down with your partner and be like, what are the 3 things that we keep fighting about? And even in really disastrous relationships, they can usually sit down and go, yeah, it's these 3, and like agree. Yeah, those are the 3 things that we fight about over and over and over again. And so what, are we just going to do that forever? Or like, do you want to interrupt that pattern?
And that's the thing, right? So when I come in and I say, listen, this is your perpetual issue and it will always be there. And the goal is to not try to fix it. It is simply to dialogue about it. So getting to the point where they can even identify what perpetual issue are we going to have throughout the entirety of our relationship, simply because of who you are and who I am. Once they can identify that and then learn to dialogue about it, that is success. Fixing it, no, it will always be there. But dialoguing about it, that is success.
Well, that was hugely helpful. That was a really great way to start to wrap this up. You know, when you said, like, we're not fixing this thing, it's with us forever, I started to imagine it's kind of like your roommate. Like, hey, couple, right? Yeah. Whether it's a man and a woman, 2 men, 2 women, couple, you have a roommate that you don't know about. This roommate is something that is just going to be with you the whole time you're together. That's it. You might as well get to know this roommate and know how to talk about the roommate. And know how to live with the roommate, because this roommate is not moving out. And the roommate might think that
I didn't mean to cut you off, but if couples think that I don't like this roommate anymore, so I'm going to get into a different relationship, you're going to have a roommate in that relationship too. So
your roommate is so curious. Your roommate is so curious about this new relationship that you're in, and your roommate wants to come on the date with you. Absolutely. That is a great point. Also cynical. Hey, that's what we do.
You brought me over to your side.
Welcome to the cynical side. This was great. Thank you so much. It's always fun chatting with you, and thanks for the work that you do with couples, helping them dialogue with their weird roommate that they don't even know they have, freeloading in their lives.
Yes.
Folks who are listening, if you'd like to get in touch with us, send questions or comments or your thoughts about any of this, you can always email the show at kate@onlytryingtohelp.com. If the question is for me, I will do my best to answer it. If it's for Melanie, I'll pass it along to Melanie. And you can stay in touch with us on social media using the handle at IWasOTTH. OTTH stands for Only Trying to Help. That's everything. Thanks, Melanie.
Thanks so much.